This is just a continuation of the initial video that I had made to show the Vulcan 165 Pro TIG that I bought. And what I want to do is hook up the other pieces. I did get a argon bottle, and it's about 3 feet tall. I managed to find a used one and was able to trade that in and get the refill on the replacement. These things are pretty expensive when they're bought directly from the supplier, but I was able to find one on Facebook Marketplace relatively cheap and bought it, did the exchange, and paid for the fill. So now what I want to do is hook up the other components and make this thing functional. That requires hooking up this feeder hose, the torch cable, or the torch, and the various cups and pieces and parts. So I'll try to get that together, and of course the regulator that's still in the box, but I showed that previously, and it should be pretty straightforward. Now, I have not done much in the way of research as far as how much gas it requires, but I may try to figure that out. And with the other welder I use, I think I have it set. What do I have the MIG set at? I'm not even sure what it regulates at right now. Let me turn it on. Let's see what it opens up to. Yeah, it's preset at about 16 pounds there, and I've had good luck with that at that setting, but I don't know what the setting is for the TIG. I'll try to figure that out as I go along. And the other thing I need to hook up is the pedal, which is sitting down here. So what else is there? I think there's, oh yeah, the power cables. So that's just your choice on that. And then this is the stick welder holder, or stick holder, rod holder, whatever you want to call it. And so there's a 220 feed. So I'll get to that later, but for now I just want to start attaching the other components. Now, the first thing I plan to install is the regulator. If you'll notice, it comes without the adjustment arm or rod or handle, whatever you want to call it, and that just threads in to that opening. And so that's what's going to set or adjust your pressure. Now, it also comes with this adapter, and I won't need this, and I'm not sure exactly how this is used, because the regulator has a tapered fitting that goes into the bottle. That matches the inside of this side of this adapter. So I'm assuming, I don't want to assume, but it has some sort of flat-faced connector here with a gasket. So I'm not sure what that's for, but I know I'm not going to need it. So I will attach this to the bottle. And I'll point this out as well. Anytime you're attaching a regulator to a new bottle, make sure that there's nothing in the opening here. And it's sometimes best, well, this is what I've always done, is to kind of deflect the air a little bit with my hand and just open that up and make sure there's no debris caught inside there. And then I can thread on the regulator. Now, you can set this at any angle you want, just so you can see the gauges. You could actually tilt it up if you wanted to, but just know that your feed hose is going to come out at this angle. So if you want it coming out and then around, that's one way, or if you were to want it to come down, just know that in advance. So to tighten this, I'm just going to use a crescent wrench and make sure it's tight. Now, same thing here. Make sure this fitting is clean and clear. I've already looked at it. I know that I just pulled it out of the box, so there shouldn't be anything caught in there. You could boost up the pressure a little bit and just let it kind of vent just a little, just to make sure there's nothing in there. The fittings on this hose is exactly the same on each end, so we'll just thread that in. There it goes. Now on this one you've got two ends, so you may want to get a second wrench so you're not twisting or turning the fitting in the regulator. But I'll get to that in just a second. The other end of the hose is going to connect to the back of the welder itself. So there's a fitting right here. You can see that. And now this becomes a little awkward. I may have to slide this to the side a little bit because it's kind of in line with the gas bottle. So if I do that, I can slide it over and make the connection. So just know that in advance. And you could, if you wanted to, take like a little block of wood or something and put here in the back so that the welder won't slide back. So I'm going to tighten these up again. I need a wrench. See what size that is. This fitting is 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to hold that steady. And then the other fitting is 11/16. So I'll tighten against it. And again, I'm not going to try to super torque these because this is brass. You know, you can break this stuff. So on the other end, 11/16, tighten that into the back of the welder. Should be able to open this up. Well, actually, it already is open. I forgot. And then put pressure on, and there it is. It's moving. The needle's moving. I don't know if you can see that or not. And there you can see the needle move as I change the setting. So I'm at 15 pounds right there, and that may be where I start with when I start experimenting with the welding. So for now I'm going to close this and move to the front. Alright, so these are some of the accessories or parts to the torch. I'm going to take that out of the bag. And now this is where you're gonna end up experimenting because you've got to a point. What you have in this container, this package, is your tungsten, your various cups. Let's see if I can't get this open without making everything go flying. I got it stapled together pretty good. So you got pieces of tungsten, and they're various sizes. You know, like that's a little bit thicker than a pencil lead. That's you know, I could get the measurements. I don't know. I have a dial caliper I could use. You've got different size cups, and I think those two are the same size. Maybe they're all the same. However, if you look on the back side, it looks like they're all three different sizes on the back, and that has to deal with, I'm sure, the size of the tungsten. So set those aside. I'm going to carefully pull out the last piece of tungsten, and that's a little tiny size, probably maybe pencil lead size, really. So to give you some perspective, the smallest diameter is 40 thousandths. That's pretty small. The next one up is around 62, something like that. And then the last one is 95. Quite a difference. Now I'm sure that comes into play whenever you're welding. You know, you want to have more heat, you're going to use a thicker piece of tungsten. So also in this kit, this is your protector, let's say for the tungsten itself once it's inside. And let me look at some of these other things. We've got different size fittings that'll hold the different size rods, so all three different sizes there. And then I'm not sure how these pieces are used, but again, they are 3 different sizes. And I have not used this system, and I have not TIG welded in since '94, so part of this is a learning curve for me as well. Alright, so I'm going to put the torch together, and I was looking over some of the pieces and I realized that the ceramic cups, they're actually threaded on the inside. So when you assemble these, this holds the long piece of tungsten. So it's going to go in the back of your torch. So I'm going to thread that on, and I'm not going to make it tight yet. Then I need to select the size that I need for the tungsten that I'm going to use. Now in this case I'm going to use the mid size and put that inside, and you'll have to line that up. You can't just shove it in there. It's not tapered. So you got to kind of feel for it and get it to go through. Now with that, I'm going to insert that into the torch head loosely, and then select the appropriate tip that goes with it, slide that over, and again line it up so that it comes through. It's not going to be a taper on the inside. And I'm going to thread that to the inside of the torch. Finger tight, I'm not going crazy with it. And then the appropriate collar that I'm going to use, or cup. So these again have different sizes, and what I've come to realize is you can put any one of these on that you want. So that's the, say, mid-size cup. That's the smaller diameter, and it'll thread on there as well. Number 4 is what shows on the cup, and that's going to give you a smaller gas opening. So I'll take that back off. And then this again is a number 5 as well. Or actually this is number 6, sorry. This is the number 5. Number 5 and number 6. Now, I'm going to go with the number 5. It's the mid-size, and I'm going to thread that on. And as I showed a minute ago, I have pre-sharpened the tip. So this, once it's threaded on, it's going to create kind of a seal for the tungsten, the end of the torch. So I push that in, and I'm going to have it stick out maybe, I don't know, 3/8 of an inch, somewhere around that range. And it looks like this may be a little bit crooked for some reason. Let me look at that again. And it's threaded on the way it should be. Put that back on. Okay, well, it's a little bit off center, and that may be a design flaw, I don't know. But I'm going to tighten up the back, and that'll put tension on the internal, or the collet, and hold that stiff. So if I want to adjust it, I can loosen this a little bit and pull this in or out, and then tighten the back, and it puts tension on the inside. So let me adjust that back down somewhere around, I don't know, 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch, and it'll vary. I mean, depending on what you're doing, as to how far you have that sticking out. And it has to be, you want your tungsten sharp so that it creates an arc. You don't want it blunt. And again, there's different uses or different sizes that will be used depending on what your project is. So I'm kind of experimenting here a little bit. I do point out there's another piece here, and what I believe is, as your tungsten wears down and gets shorter and shorter and shorter, this can be used in place on the back. And you may be in a tight space where you can't, get in with this long protective tube, and you may need a shorter piece. So this takes the place of that and seals it up with a little rubber O-ring that's on it. So just an observation. Again, I'm learning about this machine as I go, and I'm just trying to give you the information that I've figured out so far. So I'm going to put away the other two tungsten pieces. So set those aside so I don't lose them. Now I'm going to attach the torch, which has an internal port for the gas to flow through. And that's going to go on the right side. And you can see it's got a little post sticking out here. That's going to lock it in. So I line up that post. Let me see where it's at. And then turn that. And that cams over, basically locks it into place. So I'm going to set the torch up on the table in such a way that it doesn't get damaged. So it's going to kind of sit inside the table, and I can show you that in just a minute. The other thing I want to do is connect the pedal controller. So now this has a set of pins in it, and I'm sure it only lines up one way. It's got different cutouts here on these on the circle. So I have to line that up, figure out which way that goes, and it looks like the wider cutout goes up, and there's a little white dot also on top of the plug-in area, and this will thread on. A little blue collar there. So that's in place. The only thing left to do is connect my power cable. Now for me, I'm going to experiment and use the 110 to start. So you can see it's got a specific shape. This is the same for either of the power cables, but obviously it has the 110 or 120 plug-in. So this will line up a certain way. I think the tab that has the extra little nub there is facing down. So let's get that in there and turn that in, and then cam it around to where it locks. As you can see, hopefully see, I did cut my piece of wood here and on the side to help keep this from sliding sideways so that the hose does not interact with the bottle. Also, this power cable is kind of turned back against the bottle there. Just slide that over so you can see that. I don't think that's going to be an issue. You know, there's enough flexibility there that it won't hurt anything. So I'm going to plug this in, and we'll see if we can't make some welds. Alright, so there are instructions on top of the welder that tell you, depending on the gauge of material that you're using, thickness, and I will point out that they did provide this thickness gauge, which is very handy. And you can look at the numbers, like 24 gauge, it tells you to use the 40 thousandths tungsten rod, and as you move further into thicker metal, it uses a bigger piece of tungsten, all the way up to 3/16 of an inch, which is using the 3/32, the big heavy rod. So I've selected the mid-size, the 1/16 rod, and in this case I'm experimenting with this metal right here. This is some scrap from one of the Mustang projects, and I've already checked it, and it is 14 gauge. So can't go any smaller, I don't think. No, we're going to stick with 14. Alright, so we've got 14 gauge, and so it's showing a difference here. You've got 16 gauge and 12 gauge and then 10 gauge. So I'm between the 12 and 16, and the shielding gas is saying between 10 and 25 cubic feet per hour or whatever. I'm going to set mine at about 15, and then that should be it. And then it gives you duty cycles that are over here to the side. I'm not going to worry about that, but I'm going to experiment with this setting right here. And it also tells you your amperage is between, on the 16 gauge, between 50 and 85, and then 80 to 100 on the 12 gauge. So I'm going to set the welder somewhere around 80, 85, I think, and see what happens. Alright, so the inner white circle is for your 110, 120 power source, and the outer circle, the orange, is for your 240. So since I'm using 120, I'll use the white as a reference, and I'm going to turn it on. Okay, now it gives you these different settings here. That's your high frequency, pulse, TIG lift, and your stick setting. I'm going to leave it on the high frequency setting because I'm not doing a pulse type of weld. I'm just experimenting at this point. And then the lift, I don't think I want to try that yet. So I'm going to start with the first setting and go from there. Alright, so again, this is just kind of in my experimental phase of doing this. So I will point out, this is a steel welding table that I got from Harbor Freight, and I have attached the welding clamp. It's over here in this back corner. I've attached it to the table itself. This is, again, just some scrap material, and all I want to do is experiment with technique and whether I can actually do anything productive. So all I want to do is try to put some bead on this piece of material. I'm not trying to weld two pieces together. I just want to experiment and see how this operates. So I also have a piece of 3/32 rod that I'm using that was from Harbor Freight as well. And again, I'm just experimenting, so let's see what happens. And the technique that I'm using on this, on the torch, is I'm going to hold this about 1.5 the distance away based on the thickness of the rod. So if it's 1/16, figure that's times 1.5, and that's what your gap needs to be between the two. And then as I move forward and try to make some welds happen here, I will just use this rod material and just kind of try to make a bead, let's say. So let's see what happens. Let me try putting the ground directly on the part. Well, it's making a little bit of an arc. That's about it. You know, I'm not hearing a gas flow. Alright, lesson learned. And this is why I'm doing this and experimenting and showing you how this works. I didn't realize, I assumed that the torch went to the positive feed on the welder, but it doesn't. It goes to the negative feed, and the ground goes to the positive. So that's why it wasn't flowing any air or any gas. So if I do this now, you can hear it. Now I know. And also I will point out that my snap on my jacket here, making contact with the table, was giving me a mild shock. So now I know, and you know as well. And it's probably better to read all the instructions, but I'm just saying. All right, let's try this again. Oh yeah, that looks better already. I'm learning here just as much as you are. First thing I need to do is make the shade of my welding hood not so dark because it's hard to see. Let me see if I can adjust that down a little bit. And then I need to learn about controlling the height of the torch, because I kept wanting to pull away from it, and that's not the goal. Now, this rod may be a little bit heavier than what I need, but it's what I have, and it's the smallest stuff they had at Harbor Freight. So let me try that again. That's a little bit better, but it's still a lot of heat that I'm having to put into it, and I don't know if that's the way it should be. You know, it's like, I think that this was a thinner rod, I might be doing a little bit better, but it's progress. So I'm going to try another approach here and do the same thing, but anyway, yeah, I'm learning. That's a little better. A little better. I want to experiment with taking two pieces and putting them together. So, I'm going to stop it for the moment. Okay, so I have a larger piece of scrap and that piece I was just playing with. And all I'm going to do is butt them up against each other and just see if I can't weld them together. See how it goes. Lots to learn. I got penetration though. You can see it's too much penetration though. Way deep. And the metal kind of offset a little bit. You can see that there. They're not lined up with each other, so it kind of distorted the weld pattern or the shape. And anyway, I'm learning. Now again, this is heavier than I'm going to be welding, but it's just something some scrap metal to play with and experiment on. See if I can't do something a little better. Now, it might help if I recess this rod, the tungsten, a little bit. I don't know. I'm just kind of experimenting. So I'm going to loosen up this tailpiece and push in this tungsten just a little bit. Tighten this back up. And see if that doesn't change things. Not great, but yeah, I'll just say that. Not great. And it may be that I need to do some more experimenting. And like I said, and I'm not so sure if this material that I'm using might be. I thought it was the same thickness. Yeah, I think it's the same thickness. Anyway. So that's it. I'm just going to stop at this point and do a little more research on my own, see what I can come up with, and maybe I can find some information that will be helpful to you as well. We'll see. Alright, so as I pointed out, this is a learning experience for me, and I'm sure if you're watching, it may be a learning experience for you as well. But I needed to point that out. The cable feed for the torch needs to go on the left side, and that is the negative, shows it as a ground, and then the ground clamp goes to the positive side. Who knew? I guess I would have if I had actually followed the instructions and read them all the way through, but I tend to get ahead of myself a little bit. So hopefully you found some information here that may be useful to you. I don't know. Again, I'm trying to learn on my own as I do this. And so I'll probably do another video later on, and we'll see how that goes. But at this point, that's it. So I want to thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. And until next time, take care of yourselves.